Today, we're going to expose one of the most misleading ideas in modern medicine. Welcome, everyone. Welcome back to the Obesity Project, episode 37. Blood sugar control does not equal health. And so they tell you your blood sugar is under control. Your A1C is good. Maybe it's 6.7, maybe even 6.1. And your doctor gives you a pat on the back. You leave the office thinking, I'm winning, but you're gaining weight. You're more tired than ever. Your waist is expanding and your medications are stacking up. And deep down, something doesn't feel right. You've done exactly what you were told. The numbers look better, right there. So why do you feel worse? Here's why. Because lowering blood sugar is not the same as reversing disease. So let's back up a little bit. Why do we focus on blood sugar in the first place? Simple. It was easy to measure. The glucometer or the glucose meter became the gold standard for monitoring progress. Blood sugar became the headline and insulin the hidden footnote. And so the medical community built an entire strategy around one idea. And that's if you lower blood sugar, you've controlled the disease. But that strategy has one fatal flaw because in type 2 diabetes, blood sugar is not the root cause, it's just the symptom. The real problem is chronically high insulin and the progressive resistance your body builds up to that insulin over time. So let's make this real. Imagine a dam is cracking and water is starting to leak out. You run around mopping up all the puddles. You're cleaning, sure, but the wall is still collapsing. In diabetes, blood sugar is the puddle. Insulin resistance is the broken dam. So medication like sulfonylureas, I always mispronounce those, sulfonylureas or even insulin itself do a great job cleaning up that puddle. They push sugar out of your bloodstream and into your liver, your fat cells, and your muscles. But they don't fix the broken insulin response. And in fact, and this is really the shocking part, some of these drugs worsen the underlying disease. They push the pancreas harder. They raise insulin levels higher. They create the illusion of control while your metabolic health crumbles underneath. So let's talk about the evidence that they don't talk about. The medical evidence is now catching up with the clinical failure. Take the Accord trial published in the New England Journal of Medicine in 2008. Researchers tried to aggressively lower blood sugar in patients with type 2 diabetes using insulin and multiple other drugs. What was the result? Higher mortality. Let me say that again. Let me say it nice and slow. Higher mortality. The more aggressively they tried to control blood sugar with medication, the more people died. Now, why is that? Because the drugs didn't address the metabolic fire. They just silenced the alarm. It's like going up, grabbing the batteries out of the smoke detector. You're just silencing the alarm. You're not addressing the underlying metabolic disease or disorder. Now let's look at another trial called the ADVANCE trial. It's the VADT study or VAT study. Same story here. Mild improvements in A1C, no meaningful reduction in heart disease, kidney failure, or stroke because those complications aren't caused by glucose alone. They're driven by chronic inflammation, high insulin, oxidative stress, and endothelial dysfunction. Endothelium are the cells that line your vessels, all of which can exist when blood sugar looks normal. And that's the problem. We're addressing the wrong issue. We're not addressing the root cause, the insulin, we're addressing the blood sugar. So here's what every type 2 diabetic patient should know. You can absolutely have normal blood sugar and still be profoundly insulin resistant. It's called pre-diabetes. Your body is working overtime to keep your glucose in range. by cranking out absolutely massive amounts of insulin. And you don't see it on a standard test, right? They're not measuring your insulin levels. They're only looking at blood glucose, and the glucose is in normal range. But the damage is happening in the background. Fat continues to accumulate in your liver. Your blood pressure begins to rise. Inflammation is building throughout your entire body. Your arteries are stiffening and your brain is aging faster. And then one day, your blood sugar finally rises, and now they call it diabetes. But you were sick long before the blood sugar and the diabetes diagnosis was discovered. So let's talk about what actually predicts health. So, if blood sugar isn't the best measure of progress, what is? Let's talk about the real markers of metabolic health. So, one, they should be measuring fasting insulin. And ideally, that insulin level should be below eight microunits per ml. They should be measuring a HOMA IR score, which is a calculation of insulin resistance. It's a simple mathematical calculation using some of the scores of metabolic profile. So fasting insulin, HOMA IR scores, the triglyceride to HDL ratio. This one is super powerful predictor of metabolic syndrome and of cardiovascular disease. Everybody wants to focus on LDL. Everybody wants to vilify LDL and make it the master criminal, the one who wants to blow up the world, right? But the true powerful prediction ratio is the triglyceride to HDL. Doesn't even involve the LDL. Let me take a little side note here for a minute, and we can talk about this in another video. So LDL in a lot of people will actually go up when they eat a healthy diet. As people get older, their LDL rises, and actually many people feel that LDL is a predictor of longevity, not of cardiovascular disease. The one thing your doctor doesn't talk about and doesn't measure is particle size and the number of particles of LDL. So the small, very dense LDL particles are the ones that are more inflammatory and more damaging. And the larger LDL, more buoyant particles, the ones that sort of float around a lot more and don't get involved in creation of the atherosclerotic plaques, those large buoyant ones are actually totally fine. And if you're eating a normal, healthy, low carbohydrate diet, your LDL might go up, especially if you're eating a high protein, high fat content. Your LDL might go up, but if you were to look at, and this is what I'm doing while on carnivore, if you look at the size of the particle, the number of particles, you'll see that the number of particles go down, and the size of the particles go up, making them more buoyant, making them much more of a predictor of longevity and much less of a problem as far as cardiovascular disease. All right, let's go back to what I was talking about before. We talked about fasting insulin levels. We talked about HOMA IR scores. We talked about triglyceride to HDL ratio. Let's continue on. So waist circumference and visceral fat. Now, this one is the one that has been so powerful for me because my actual weight while on carnivore and again, I'm not here to promote carnivore. Carnivore is a type of ketogenic or low carbohydrate diet. The thing that's nice about carnivore is really almost a no carbohydrate diet. And one of the things that I've seen being at normal weight and not being obese is that I haven't really seen much of a difference in terms of my actual weight, yet my waist circumference has gone down quite a bit. And that reflects visceral fat. And visceral fat is the most dangerous fat that you can have on your body. And it's much, much more of a predictor of health or of disease than what the weight on your scale says. All right, so waist circumference and visceral fat will absolutely go down on a healthy diet. And then liver enzymes and fat accumulation. These are other markers of metabolic health that we should be looking at. Non-alcoholic fatty liver disease insulin resistance is in disguise. So, you may not even be aware that the insulin resistance is increasing. And as the insulin resistance increases, your liver is still converting glucose into fat, but there's nowhere for the fat to go because you're insulin resistant. And so the liver starts to build up all that fat inside itself. And so fasting insulin, HOMA-IR scores, triglyceride to HDL ratios, waist circumference and visceral fat, and liver enzymes and fat accumulation. Those are the predictors of, and those are the markers of metabolic health. And here's the kicker. Most primary care doctors aren't measuring any of this. They're simply chasing a glucose number on a monitor while the root problem continues to grow. So, what actually works? The answer really isn't that complicated. It's just not profitable, and that's the problem. Where there's no money, nobody's talking about things. There's no one out there promoting. Now, let me take a step back. There are plenty of people promoting good diet, low carbohydrate diets, and other things. There are plenty of people that are trying to spread the word like I'm trying to spread the word. But when it comes to commercial enterprise, when it comes to government, promotion, when it comes to, the money behind the message, the problem is we can reverse type 2 diabetes, but it's not profitable to do that. And so that's why the focus isn't there. So the answer actually is low carbohydrate diets, intermittent fasting, exercise and strength training, sleep, stress reduction, and circadian rhythm management. Sleep is an absolutely essential part of the process of becoming more healthy, fighting insulin resistance, dropping those cortisol levels, stress reduction, circadian rhythm management. All of these things are very, very important. Okay, so in the Virta health trial, they found that 60% of patients absolutely reversed their diabetes through ketogenic diet and coaching with zero medications. And Dr. Jason Fung's fasting protocols helped thousands eliminate insulin and normalize their blood sugar by lowering insulin, not just glucose. Because when you fix the cause, the symptoms, they take care of themselves. So let me be blunt. If you're focusing only on glucose, you're being misled. If you're a type 2 diabetic and you're told your blood glucose is in the normal range, and congratulations, you're doing a great job, but you're still eating a high carbohydrate diet, you're still eating ultra processed refined foods, you're still getting massive glucose spikes, but your A1C is in normal range. That's not the fix. You're not actually healthy. You are being misled. Because blood sugar is not the disease. Insulin resistance is. If you're asking me why I started carnivore, being relatively thin, and not that I don't have any weight to lose, but being in the normal range and not being obese, it's because I wanted to remain healthy. I wanted to fight insulin resistance, which was my main issue. Despite intermittent fasting and despite eating a low carb diet and despite doing all these things, I was still seeing a problem with insulin resistance, which is why I went carnivore. But again, you can do ketogenic, you can do low carb, you can pick what type of diet you want to do as long as it's low to no carb. And so if you don't treat the fire, managing the smoke is not going to save you. If you're tired of chasing numbers, if you're ready to treat the root cause, if you want real health, not just a good A1C on a lab test, then it's time to shift your strategy. Don't just lower your sugar, lower your insulin. Rebuild your metabolism and reclaim your life. So I just want to let you guys know in the next episode, we're going to talk about the TOFI trap, TOFI, how thin people get diabetes. And just remember, it's not just the numbers on a glucometer. So thank you so much for checking this out. And remember, health isn't just about numbers, it's about function. Don't just chase glucose, chase real healing, chase insulin sensitivity. And remember that blood sugar is the smoke, insulin resistance is the fire. So go ahead and put out that fire. So thank you so much for watching. Like, share, and comment as always. Subscribe. Make sure you get additional videos. I want to spread the word. I want to get the word out that, you know, we've got to focus on insulin and not on glucose numbers. We've got to reverse type 2 diabetes, not make it worse by feeding, fanning the flames with all of these drugs that, increase insulin production or increase insulin resistance. So thanks so much for taking the time with me. I really appreciate you, and I'll catch you in the next video. Take care.